everyone. Welcome to my podcast where we discuss current legal events and legal hot topics. So, if you're someone who's interested in legal issues and legal developments, but maybe you're not familiar with legal jargon or legal terminology, well, then this is the place for you because we'll be discussing the definitions of a lot of the legal terms that you'll hear in the news, and we'll also be providing an introspection from the point of view of an attorney such as myself, by which we analyze some of the prevailing yet problematic themes of today's legal climate. So throughout the course of this podcast, we will be looking at three predominant themes that are unfortunately occurring in our legal climate today in the United States. So first thing we'll be looking at is the prevalence of feelings and personal opinions being given credence over facts and legal reasoning. Now, this is problematic because legal reasoning is the foundation of our legal system. And legal reasoning has traditionally and is only actually achieved by taking the facts of a situation or dispute, applying those facts, which are objective, to the law, which should also be objective, and that should give us a legal conclusion, which should also be objective. That process is what I refer to as legal reasoning. Now, the problem with today's legal climate is that more frequently we are seeing feelings and personal opinions being substituted in for facts. This is problematic because feelings and personal opinions are subjective, and this adds a subjective layer into what is otherwise supposed to be a objective process. And so over the course of the podcast, we'll be looking at how this particular theme is impacting today's legal climate. Now, the next thing we'll be discussing is the tendency for the law to be used more as a sword instead of a shield in today's legal climate. Now, this is problematic because the law has been intended to function as a shield. The purpose of the law is to establish uniform standards for societal behavior. We then use those standards and rely on those standards, and we all expect that the law will be enacted, applied, and enforced in a manner that is fair to society as a whole. Unfortunately, when we see the law being used as a sword, we typically see some type of injustice and or oppression. So instead of the law being enacted, applied, and enforced in a fair manner, it's typically going to be enacted or applied or enforced, or maybe even all three of these elements will be done in a manner that is unfair to at least some portion of society, if not, unfortunately, society as a whole. Now, the last legal theme that we will be looking at that is persistent and problematic in today's legal climate is what I like to refer to as the great undoing. Now, unfortunately, today's legal climate is fraught with unprecedented division and what myself and I'm confident many other legal professionals see as manipulation of foundational legal principles to create outcomes that are preferred by individuals or factions versus outcomes that contribute to the general good of society as a whole. So some of the main methodologies used to manipulate these foundational legal principles are some of the things we just spoke about: the substitution of feelings and personal opinions in the stead of facts, and the use of the law as a sword instead of a shield. Now, some of the hot topics that we are going to talk about, now this is not an exclusive list, it's just intended to provide you with a little bit of information about some of the topics we'll be discussing over the course of the podcast. So if any of these topics are something that you're interested in, then definitely stay tuned. So we'll be discussing the First Amendment to our United States Constitution. Typically, this is going to relate to freedom of speech. However, it also includes freedom of religion. We're also going to be looking at the 14th Amendment, which relates to what lawyers call due process, which is how laws are applied. We'll be looking at gerrymandering, which is used to describe the method by which voting districts are crafted in our United States Congress and state legislatures. So this is impactful to voting issues. We'll also be looking at the issue of abortion. However, we will not be looking at the common standpoint of pro-choice versus pro-life. Instead, we're going to be looking at how these laws are being analyzed and being enacted and applied and enforced in today's current legal climate. We'll also be looking at the health and public safety issues. Predominantly, that's going to relate to COVID-19. There's been a lot of movement in this area, so I expect that this will be something we'll discuss frequently. And lastly, we will also be looking at issues of what I like to term deregulation. So deregulation is the opposite of regulation. So we know that in society there's rules and there's regulations. So deregulation is along the theme of the great undoing. Deregulation is the undoing of regulations that already exist. So that's a non-exhaustive list of some of the topics that we'll be discussing throughout the course of this podcast. So if you're interested in learning about these issues, or you're interested in a discussion of these issues from the perspective of a legal professional or an attorney such as myself, then stay tuned and hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in our next podcast.